the ancient hills of Israel, once united under kings like Saul, David and Solomon, there lived 12 tribes, descendants of Jacob's 12 sons. These tribes weren't just families, they were nations within a nation, each with land, leaders, customs and traditions. But then something happened. 10 of them vanished, not metaphorically, not mythically, historically. Gone. We call them the 10 lost tribes of Israel. But lost doesn't begin to cover it. This wasn't a migration or a quiet decline. It was a disappearance on a national scale, and no one truly knows what happened. The story begins in the 8th century BCE. At the time, the ancient kingdom of Israel had split into two, Judah in the south with Jerusalem as its capital, and Israel in the north with Samaria as its heart. The northern kingdom was larger, home to 10 tribes. Then came the Assyrian Empire, powerful, brutal, unstoppable. In 722 BCE, the Assyrians stormed into the northern kingdom and conquered it. They didn't just defeat Israel, they erased it. Cities were destroyed, leaders were killed or captured. The survivors, tens of thousands of them, were deported, forced into exile across the vast reaches of the Assyrian realm. And from there, they vanish. No detailed records, no preserved settlements, just silence. Judah remained, with the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Their story continued in the Bible and history. But the other 10, Reuben, Simeon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, Manasseh, all gone. The Bible mentions the exile briefly, but there's no account of return, no reunion, no aftermath. So where did they go? The theories stretch across time and continents. One of the earliest claims? That the 10 tribes moved eastward, into Persia, Afghanistan, or India. In these regions, oral traditions persist. Some groups, like the Pashtuns of Afghanistan, claim descent from the Israelites. Their tribal names, customs, even circumcision practices, some argue, mirror those of ancient Hebrews. Coincidence? Or forgotten lineage? In Ethiopia, the Beta Israel community, Ethiopian Jews, have practiced Judaism for centuries. Some say they are descended from the tribe of Dan. Their sacred texts and rituals differ slightly from mainstream Judaism, as if preserved separately, in isolation. In India, the Bnei Menashe, a group from the northeast, also claim descent from the tribe of Manasseh. Their oral history tells of a journey from Israel, across Persia, through China, and finally into India. For generations they observed Sabbath dietary laws and spoke of a homeland they'd never seen. Could they be remnants of the lost tribes? And then there's something even stranger. In the 17th century, explorers reported that indigenous tribes in the Americas practiced customs oddly similar to ancient Israelite rites: circumcision, purification rituals, sacred calendars. Could it be that some tribes crossed into Asia, then into Alaska, and down through the Americas? Mainstream scholars say no, but the stories remain. In Japan, some Shinto traditions share linguistic and ceremonial parallels with Hebrew customs. In China, records describe a mysterious group known as the Kaifeng Jews, with Hebrew scrolls and synagogues, but no known route of arrival. And throughout history, charismatic leaders have emerged, claiming to be from the lost tribes, sparking entire movements. In the Middle Ages, rumours spread of a powerful Jewish king named Prester John, ruling in a far-off land, descended from the tribes. Crusaders searched for him, so did explorers. He was never found. Modern genetic testing has tried to resolve the mystery, but results are unclear. Some groups, like the Bnei Menashe, have been accepted by Israeli authorities as potential descendants. Others remain in limbo, tied more by tradition than by proof. But here's the twist. What if the tribes didn't disappear at all? What if they assimilated? The Assyrians were known for deporting conquered peoples and scattering them across vast territories. Their strategy wasn't genocide, it was identity erasure. If the Israelites were forced to intermarry, adopt foreign languages and abandon their customs, they would fade, not die, but dissolve. Over time, their lineage would survive, without memory. You could be descended from them. I could. Anyone could. That's the haunting part of the 10 lost tribes. They might not be gone. They might be everywhere. And perhaps the idea of lost isn't about geography. Maybe it's about memory. A nation scattered into dust. A people whose past was stolen, not by death, but by forgetting. But the echoes are still there. In stories, in symbols, in names, songs, and dreams passed down without knowing where they came from. A rhythm buried deep in cultures that don't remember their own origin. The 10 lost tribes remain one of the greatest historical mysteries of all time. From above, the desert seems quiet, empty, barren, and then you see it. A perfect hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, etched not on canvas, but on the earth itself. Massive, haunting drawings that stretch hundreds of feet long across the Nazca desert of Peru. And no one knows why. These aren't just big doodles. The Nazca lines, made over 2,000 years ago, are geoglyphs, designs carved into the ground by removing the reddish stones on top to reveal the lighter soil underneath. Some are straight lines that go on for miles, others are intricate shapes, spirals, and animals that can only be seen from the sky. But here's the twist. Humans had no way of flying back then. So who were these designs meant for? Archaeologists say the Nazca people created them between 500 BCE and 500 CE using wooden stakes, ropes, and careful planning. No modern tech, just sheer will and ingenuity. Still, the precision is eerie. Some lines are laser straight. Some images are scaled perfectly, as if drawn by someone watching from above. Were they for gods, celestial beings, rituals, or maybe star maps and calendars? Some scholars think the lines align with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, constellations. Others believe they were walkable ceremonial paths. But that doesn't explain the monkey, or the astronaut-shaped figure with big eyes and waving arms. And yes, there is one like that. It's been nicknamed the astronaut, and this is where it gets weirder. Some researchers have argued that these were messages meant for sky gods, or even ancient alien visitors. While most scientists reject that theory, it hasn't stopped the speculation. The images are just too precise, too massive, too strange. Over 300 figures, most only visible from the sky, in a time when the sky was unreachable. Who did they make these for? The scale is baffling. The hummingbird stretches 93 meters from beak to tail, the monkey over 130 feet long. One spiral tail curls with mathematical elegance. Some lines run perfectly straight for more than 10 miles, across hills, valleys, and all. With no aerial view, how could they plan something so massive? The desert has helped preserve them. It almost never rains in Nazca. Wind is rare. The dry, windless, and stable climate has kept these massive messages intact for centuries, like nature itself conspired to hold the secret safe. But maybe the lines weren't messages. Maybe they were part of rituals. There's a theory that the Nazca people used the lines to walk and pray, following the shapes during ceremonies for rain or harvest. After all, in a place so dry, rain would be more precious than gold. The lines might have been spiritual paths, sacred geometry walked by bare feet under the blazing sun. Others look at the stars. Some researchers say certain lines point to constellations or astronomical events, solstices, planetary alignments, maybe even lunar cycles. Could the lines have served as a massive calendar or observatory? But then there's the theory that turns everything upside down. They were made for those who came from above. Erich von Däniken, the author who popularized the ancient aliens theory, believed that the Nazca people were visited by extraterrestrial beings. that the figures were signals, landing zones, or even attempts to communicate with visitors from other worlds, that the so-called astronaut figure was exactly what it looks like, someone in a helmet, waving from the past. Of course, mainstream archaeology doesn't buy that. They say we underestimate ancient peoples, that humans are capable of incredible feats without outside help. And maybe that's true. But even so, the mystery remains. There are over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric shapes, and 70 animal and plant drawings, many only discovered in recent years using drones and satellite imagery, and more might still be out there, buried under sand, lost in the shifting desert. And then there's the human side of the story. The Nazca people were artists, engineers, and believers. They lived in one of the harshest climates on Earth and still found time to create something massive and beautiful, something we still can't fully understand. Maybe the lines weren't meant to be understood. Maybe they were meant to be felt, like the way you feel when you see a giant hummingbird drawn on the ground and realize someone 2,000 years ago wanted you to see it, wanted you to wonder, wanted you to feel small. You can erase a story from paper, but when it's carved into the earth, it waits for someone to come along and ask, why? In the ruins of one of Earth's oldest civilizations, archaeologists uncovered something that shouldn't exist. A clay tablet, covered not with myths or prayers, but star maps, thousands of years old, and yet incredibly precise. The Sumerians lived in Mesopotamia, in what is now Iraq, around 4000 BCE, long before telescopes, before satellites, before modern astronomy. And yet, these ancient people seem to know things about the sky that shouldn't have been possible. The most famous of these discoveries is the planisphere, an ancient star map found in Nineveh. It's a round clay tablet, cracked and faded with age, but once deciphered, it revealed an astonishing level of astronomical detail. The stars, the constellations, and, strangely, a possible record of an asteroid impact event. How did they know? The tablet appears to show the position of the night sky on a specific date. Some scholars say it might record a cosmic event, like the asteroid or comet that hit the Austrian Alps around 3123 BCE. The tablet even describes a blazing object crossing the sky, possibly fragmenting midair. But here's the unsettling part. It matches modern simulations of that exact impact. Now pause for a second. A civilization with no lenses, no satellites, and no modern math may have recorded a cosmic disaster with uncanny precision. That's not just impressive, it's chilling. The Sumerians didn't just name constellations, they tracked planetary motions, lunar cycles, eclipses. They developed a base 60 mathematical system, one we still use today to measure time and angles. Their zodiac was the foundation for much of Babylonian, Greek, and even modern astrology. But the real mystery isn't just what they knew, it's how they knew it. Some believe they had access to lost knowledge, perhaps inherited from an even older civilization now lost to time. Others go further, speculating about ancient visitors from the stars, the Anunnaki. According to Sumerian mythology, the Anunnaki were powerful sky beings who came from the heavens to earth. Were they just gods, or were they something else? Some fringe theorists suggest the Anunnaki brought advanced knowledge, including astronomy. Mainstream historians reject this. They argue the Sumerians were simply brilliant observers of the sky, with centuries of careful records. And maybe that's true. But the planisphere continues to raise eyebrows, especially when modern astronomy keeps confirming some of its eerie details. There are other tablets too, ones that describe planetary alignments with shocking accuracy, ones that hint at knowledge of the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, even Pluto, long before they were discovered. Coincidence? Guesswork? Or were they taught? Some suggest that ancient observers spent lifetimes watching the sky, passing down knowledge generation after generation until they could predict cosmic events with precision. Others argue they had help from beings more advanced than we care to admit. But let's take a step back. Even if we ignore the more extreme theories, what remains is still breathtaking. The Sumerians created observatories made of mud brick. They tracked Venus and Jupiter. They named constellations still recognized today. They invented timekeeping systems based on celestial movement. And their myths, oh, their myths. Stories of gods descending in fiery chariots, of battles in the sky, of heavenly tablets and forbidden knowledge. Echoes of something deeper, maybe metaphor, maybe memory. Their temples, called ziggurats, weren't just religious buildings. They were aligned with the stars. Many believe they functioned as early observatories. High above the flat Mesopotamian plains, these structures gave priests and astronomers a better view of the heavens. It wasn't just science, it was worship. To the Sumerians, the sky wasn't distant, it was divine. And perhaps that's the heart of this mystery, the line between science and myth, between what they believed and what they actually knew. We still don't know how they recorded certain celestial patterns so early, or why some tablets reference cycles that would take generations to observe. The planisphere may be just one piece of a greater puzzle, one scattered across time, waiting to be pieced together. Maybe the stars have always whispered their secrets, and maybe someone long ago listened better than we do now. In dusty museum drawers and forgotten excavation sites across Europe, strange bronze objects keep turning up, objects that have baffled historians for centuries. They're called Roman dodecahedrons, hollow 12-sided shapes made of bronze or stone. Each face has a circular hole. The sizes vary. The craftsmanship is precise. And here's the thing, we have absolutely no idea what they were used for. Over 100 of them have been found across Europe, from the edges of Roman Britain to the far reaches of Gaul and Germany. They date back to the 2nd and 3rd centuries CE, squarely in the height of the Roman Empire, and yet no Roman texts ever mention them. Not a word, not a whisper. How does an empire obsessed with record-keeping forget to mention a tool, a weapon, or a religious item used widely across its territory? That's where the mystery begins. Some of these dodecahedrons are small enough to fit in your palm. Others are slightly larger. All have 12 flat faces, all with holes of different diameters. Some even have small knobs at the corners. They look mathematical, purposeful. But no one knows the purpose. Theories? Oh, there are plenty. Some say they were candle holders. Others think they were gaming dice. Some suggest surveying tools or astronomical devices. One theory claims they were used to knit gloves. Yes, gloves. A theory supported by experimental archaeologists who've demonstrated that you can indeed knit fingered gloves by looping yarn through the holes. But why the variation in hole sizes? Why the consistent shape? Why no standardization? It gets more bizarre. Many of these objects were found in graves, buried with Roman soldiers. Others were discovered at sites with ritual significance. But still, no inscriptions, no accompanying explanations. Just silence. Could they have been religious? Objects of divination? Perhaps each hole aligned with the stars or the solstices. Or maybe they were instruments of augury, used by priests to interpret the will of the gods. Some fringe theories claim they were part of a lost Roman technology, advanced devices whose function has vanished from collective memory. Others whisper about alien artifacts, pointing to their geometric precision and unknown purpose. Of course, most scholars scoff at the extraterrestrial ideas, but even the mainstream can't agree, because there is simply not enough evidence to prove anything. No two dodecahedrons are exactly alike. Some have inner ridges, some don't. Some were found near military sites, others far from any known Roman garrison. One was found near a hoard of coins, another inside a child's burial. What connects them? Nothing, and everything. There's also the question of why they appear only in the northern and western parts of the empire. No dodecahedrons have ever been found in Italy, the empire's heartland. Why would Rome's farthest provinces have these, but not the capital? Was this a localized tool? A cultural artifact of the frontier? Something non-Roman adopted and adapted by Roman soldiers or citizens living far? In the golden age of ancient Egypt, during the reign of the legendary pharaoh Rameses II, there lived a prince unlike any other. His name was Khaemweset. He was the fourth son of the mighty king, born into a world of opulence, war, and divine power. But while his brothers took up swords and governed territories, Khaemweset wandered into the shadows of history. He chose not to build temples of his own, but to resurrect the dead, at least their memories. He was fascinated by ruins, obsessed with them, and that made him strange. You see, the Egypt Khaemweset was born into was already thousands of years old. By his time, the pyramids of Giza were ancient relics. Tombs from the Old Kingdom had been swallowed by sand. Names had been lost. Dynasties forgotten. But Khaemweset didn't accept that. He wanted to restore what had been erased by time. And that's where the mystery begins. Khaemweset didn't just study the past. He went out into the desert, entered collapsed tombs, read half-erased hieroglyphs, and ordered restorations. He reinscribed names onto crumbling stone. One of his surviving inscriptions says, "It is the Prince Khaemweset, who loved antiquity and who restored the monuments of the kings." Imagine that, a man walking into a pyramid that was already abandoned for centuries, climbing down into the dark and scribbling notes on the ancient dead. He wasn't just studying the past, he was waking it up. And according to legend, it woke up with him. The Egyptians were deeply spiritual people. They believed the dead needed constant care, food offerings, prayers, and remembrance. Without these, the soul, the ka, would wither. And worse, the spirit, the ak, could become restless, vengeful. To disturb a tomb was to break a sacred contract. But Khaemweset didn't believe in curses. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. He entered tomb after tomb, temple after temple. Some were sealed for centuries. Some believed his obsession grew out of something he found, something that changed him. There were whispers that he began having dreams. Not normal dreams. Dreams of voices calling his name from the sands. Dreams of forgotten kings begging to be remembered. Some even said the dead visited him in his chambers. One story tells of a priest who approached the prince in secret, warning him that he had seen a spirit trailing behind him like a shadow. The spirit, he claimed, was a woman with a face both beautiful and decayed, who stared at the prince but never spoke. Khaemweset is said to have replied, "I have restored her house. If she follows, it is only to thank me." But the priest walked away pale, convinced it was not gratitude that brought the ghost. Things got stranger. In the final years of his life, Khaemweset reportedly commissioned a strange structure, hidden beneath the Temple of Ptah in Memphis. It wasn't a tomb, it wasn't a shrine. No inscriptions explain what it was for. But some scholars believe it was a barrier, meant to hold back something unseen, something only Khaemweset understood. And then, he disappeared. There are no surviving records of his burial place, no tomb, no mummy, nothing. For a man so obsessed with restoring graves and remembering the dead, his own resting place is lost. But the ancient Egyptians didn't forget him. That's when the real twist comes. Centuries after his death, Khaemweset reappears, in myth, not history. Myth! He became the central figure in a series of magical Egyptian ghost stories known as the Setna Tales. In these stories, he's renamed Setna Khaemweset, but it's clearly him, the son of Rameses, the priest who enters ancient tombs, the man who cannot resist forbidden knowledge. In one story, he steals a magic scroll from the tomb of a sorcerer named Naneferkaptah, but the scroll is cursed. Setna is haunted by the dead sorcerer and his ghostly wife and child, who beg him to return what he's taken. Another tale describes Setna being seduced by the ghost of a beautiful woman. She tricks him into giving up his own child in a dream. When he wakes, the child is gone. The stories are dark, they're weird, and they're not just bedtime fables. In Egyptian culture, myths were how people explained things too terrifying or too sacred for facts. The myth of Setna was how the ancient world processed the idea that someone had dared to cross the boundary between life and death too many times. The boundaries mattered. The dead were not meant to be disturbed, not without consequences, and it seems that even Khaemweset, Egypt's prince of the past, paid a price. Modern Egyptologists still study his life with awe. His restorations are considered one of the earliest examples of historical preservation. Without him, we might have lost the names of dozens of kings and queens, but there's a haunting irony. For all his work remembering others, his own story ends in mystery. High in the misty mountains of China, near the border of Tibet, lies one of the strangest and most debated archaeological mysteries of the 20th century. It's a story that begins not with fame or fanfare, but with a quiet expedition in 1938. Led by a Chinese professor named Chi Pu Tei, the team ventured into the Bayan Ha mountain range, hoping to discover ancient cave art or early signs of human habitation. Instead, they found graves, many of them. But the skeletons inside didn't match any known population. They were tiny, not child-sized, but abnormally small adult forms, no taller than 4 feet. The skulls were disproportionately large, and the bones were delicate. Scientists were baffled. But the strangest part was what lay beside the bodies. Stone discs. Dozens of them. Each was perfectly round, around 9 inches across, with a small hole in the centre, and strange spiral carvings running from edge to centre. They looked almost like ancient vinyl records, except these were carved in solid stone. At first, they were dismissed as ritual objects, but under close inspection, the spirals weren't random patterns. They were symbols, writing, so fine it required magnification to be read. That's when the real mystery began. The discs were forgotten for decades, stored in archives, passed between museums, dismissed by most experts. Then, in the early 1960s, a man named Tsum Nui appeared. A Chinese linguist, he claimed to have deciphered the symbols on the discs. What he found sounded like science fiction. According to his translation, the discs were a record of a spacecraft that crashed in the mountains thousands of years ago. The beings on board called themselves the Dropa. They couldn't fix their ship and were stranded on Earth. Eventually, they came into contact with local human tribes. At first, there was fear, then conflict, but peace was made, and the Dropa lived out their lives on Earth, dying and being buried in the caves where they were found. Most historians and scientists dismissed the claims. The language didn't match anything known. The story was too wild. The Chinese authorities reportedly banned further discussion of Tsum Nui's work, and he quietly vanished. Some say he fled to Japan, others say he died mysteriously. Whatever the truth, his translations were never officially published in academic journals, and the Dropa stones, they disappeared again. Years later, in the 1970s, an Austrian engineer named Ernst Wegerer visited a museum in Xi'an. There, he claimed to see 2 stone discs matching the Dropa description on display. He took photographs, but when he returned, the discs were gone, and the museum staff denied they'd ever been there. Was it all a hoax? Skeptics argue that there's no record of the 1938 expedition, that the names involved, Chi Pu Tei, Tsum Nui, are untraceable in academic databases. They say the Dropa story originated not in China, but in post-war Russian publications, feeding off Cold War paranoia. No one has ever produced a Dropa stone for public analysis. No peer-reviewed translation exists. The evidence, they argue, is non-existent. But believers aren't convinced by the silence. In fact, the lack of evidence is part of the mystery. If the Dropa stones were real, and they truly contained a story that challenged history itself, wouldn't governments have a reason to hide them? What's most unsettling is how the Dropa legend echoes other ancient stories from around the world. Civilizations from Africa to South America speak of sky people. Tribes describe strange beings that arrived from the stars, shared knowledge, and then vanished. And in nearly every culture, there are legends of small people with large heads, dwarfish beings who walked among giants. Could the Dropa story be one more version of a much older truth? Or is it all just coincidence? We may never know. The stones are missing, the caves have never been officially located, and the people who once claimed to hold the truth have all disappeared into the fog of history. But one thing is clear, whether real or imagined, the Dropa stones remind us of a possibility we don't often consider. That the past may not be as simple as it seems, that history might be missing pieces too strange to fit in the textbook version of our world. And maybe, just maybe, someone made sure those pieces stayed missing. Far out in the Pacific Ocean lies one of the most isolated places on Earth, Easter Island. Known for its mysterious stone statues called moai, this island hides a lesser-known but even stranger mystery. A forgotten script, a writing system no one can read, a language that might hold the key to the island's past, if only someone could understand it. It's called Rongorongo. When Europeans first arrived on Easter Island in the 1700s, they found the islanders living simple lives with no apparent written language. But in 1864, a Catholic missionary named Eugène Hérault reported something astonishing. He saw wooden tablets in the homes of the locals, covered in rows of symbols, strange glyph-like carvings that looked nothing like the Latin alphabet or Polynesian petroglyphs. The people called this writing Rongorongo. The characters weren't just symbols, they were tiny human figures, animals, plants, and geometric shapes all etched with careful precision. Some sat, others stood, and many seemed to face each other as if engaged in silent conversations. The glyphs were arranged in rows, read in a unique pattern called reverse boustrophodon. One line from left to right, the next from right to left, and so on, with each line flipped upside down relative to the one before. But what did they mean? No one knew. By the time scholars became interested, the island's population had been decimated by disease, slavery, and colonization. Most of the knowledge about Rongorongo had vanished. The last people who claimed to understand it had died without passing on their secrets. All that remained were a few dozen tablets, scattered across museums around the world. Attempts to decode Rongorongo have continued for over a century. Linguists, cryptographers, and historians have all tried. Some believe the writing may record genealogies or religious chants. Others think it might be a calendar system. But without a Rosetta Stone or living speakers to compare it to, progress is painfully slow. Some tablets seem to repeat certain symbols, suggesting structure. Others appear to describe astronomical events, including lunar cycles. A few researchers claim to have identified patterns that match lunar calendars used in other Polynesian cultures. But even the most optimistic admit that these are just educated guesses. The mystery deepens when you consider how writing got to Easter Island in the first place. The rest of Polynesia had no native writing systems. Did the Rapa Nui people invent Rongorongo entirely on their own? If so, that would make it one of the few independently created scripts in human history, an achievement rivaling ancient Mesopotamia or China, or did they learn it from outsiders? Some theorists point to early South American influence, especially from the Inca or pre-Inca cultures, but there's no clear evidence of direct contact. And then there's the dark possibility that Rongorongo isn't a true writing system at all. Some scholars argue it might be proto-writing, symbols meant to represent ideas or objects, rather than full words or sentences. Others say the glyphs were purely decorative or ceremonial. But if that were true, why would they be carved so carefully into sacred wooden tablets? Why would so many different symbols exist, arranged in such precise patterns? No one carves 1,000 unique symbols just for decoration. The Rongorongo tablets remain an enigma. They sit in quiet display cases in museums in Chile, Germany, and the United States. Tourists walk past them, unaware that they may be looking at the last whispers of a lost language, a script born from isolation, mystery, and perhaps desperation. Maybe the Rapa Nui carved their history into wood, hoping it would outlast them. Maybe Rongorongo was their last attempt to preserve knowledge in a world falling apart. Or maybe it's something older, stranger, connected to forces and cultures we have yet to discover. Until someone deciphers the script, we'll never know, and time is not on our side. Only 26 tablets are known to exist, and many are weathered, burned, or broken. Each year, they degrade a little more. The answers might be fading faster than we realize. One thing is certain, the Rongorongo script is not just a mystery of Easter Island, it's a riddle of humanity itself, a question that asks how far people will go to leave behind a voice, even when no one is left to hear it. In the highlands of central Mexico, not far from modern-day Mexico City, lies one of the most mysterious archaeological sites in the world, Teotihuacan. A city so old that even the Aztecs, who found its ruins centuries later, had no idea who built it. They simply called it the place where the gods were born. At its northern end stands a massive pyramid, not as tall as the nearby Temple of the Sun, but somehow more haunting, more secretive. This is the Temple of the Moon. It stares across the Avenue of the Dead with cold symmetry, ancient and immovable, its steps leading not just upward but backward into the unknown. For decades, archaeologists believed the Temple of the Moon was simply a ceremonial structure, a sacred platform for rituals, offerings, worship. But recent discoveries have hinted at something darker, something deeper, literally. Beneath the pyramid, researchers using ground-penetrating radar found a hidden chamber, perfectly circular, lined with mica, a mineral that reflects heat and electricity. Around it were strange metallic spheres, hollow and highly reflective. No writing, no tools, no bones, just orbs. Hundreds of them. What were they for? No one knows. But that's not the only mystery. In 2004, archaeologists discovered human remains at the site, buried beneath the pyramid in carefully arranged patterns. The bones were dismembered, decapitated, sometimes burned. Many had their hands tied, others were surrounded by obsidian blades, jewelry and exotic animal remains. Jaguars, wolves, eagles. This wasn't ordinary burial. It was sacrifice. But for what? And for whom? Teotihuacan had no known rulers, no names, no statues of kings or queens, no royal tombs. It was a city without a face. The murals show gods, stars, serpents, but never leaders. It was as if the people wanted to erase themselves from history and leave behind only the ritual. Some scholars believe the Temple of the Moon was the site of mass offerings to ensure cosmic balance, that its shape mirrors the sacred mountain Cerro Gordo behind it, a place thought to be a portal between the world of humans and the divine. That sacrifices made here weren't about cruelty, but about feeding the universe. But others aren't so sure. The layout of the chamber beneath the pyramid suggests geometry far too advanced for its time. The mica isn't native to the region. It was transported from hundreds of miles away. Why go to such lengths for something invisible? Unless the chamber wasn't for the living, but for something else, something listening. Some even speculate that the orbs beneath the temple served as an energy system, or storage, that the ancient builders tapped into unknown forces, perhaps astronomical, perhaps electromagnetic, to connect with something beyond Earth. Sounds like science fiction? That's exactly what many said, until scientists found traces of liquid mercury in underground tunnels nearby. Mercury, long associated with alchemy and transformation, is also highly conductive. And deadly. What were the people of Teotihuacan doing with it? We don't know. They left no clues, no writing, no records, just stone, just silence. The Temple of the Moon holds these secrets like a sealed vault, refusing to speak. Excavations continue, but the deeper researchers go, the stranger the findings become. Unfired clay figures with staring eyes, burned offerings placed in precise directions, and chambers that suggest intentional alignments with celestial bodies, moon phases, eclipses, equinoxes. Could it be that the temple wasn't just a place of worship, but a machine, a device designed to communicate with the sky, or to appease something in it? The Aztecs believed Teotihuacan was where the fifth sun, the current age of the world, was born. They performed rituals there long after the city's builders had vanished. Even they treated the Temple of the Moon with fear and reverence. They didn't claim it. They inherited it like a haunted house. They renamed the city, but never pretended to understand it, and neither do we. The Temple of the Moon remains, watching, unchanged. Its shadow stretches down the avenue of the dead like a memory too heavy to forget. Tourists climb its steps, drones fly over it, cameras record its symmetry, but no one can explain it. Not fully, not yet. Maybe it's just a monument, maybe it's a tomb, or maybe it's something far stranger. A map, a code, a message carved in stone, waiting for someone to finally read it. And maybe, when that happens, we'll wish we hadn't. In the shadowy river valleys of Eastern Europe, long before the pyramids rose in Egypt, before Sumerians carved cuneiform into clay, there was something else, something older. Carved into pottery, etched onto idols, and painted onto walls were tiny markings. They weren't random, they weren't decoration, they looked intentional. They're called the Vinca symbols. Discovered in the late 19th century, these strange markings first emerged from the soil of modern-day Serbia in a Neolithic settlement near the village of Vinca, just outside Belgrade. What archaeologists found there changed how we think about the beginnings of written language, and maybe even civilization itself. Buried under layers of ancient earth were thousands of ceramic objects, bowls, tablets, figurines. Many were covered in symbols, lines, dots, crosses, chevrons, spirals. Some repeated, some stood alone. And they were old, very old. Radiocarbon dating placed them between 5,500 and 4,000 BCE. That's older than the earliest Sumerian writing, older than Egyptian hieroglyphs, older than Stonehenge. So, what were they? For decades, scholars dismissed them as decoration, artistic patterns, but the more they looked, the harder that explanation became to accept. The symbols weren't just random, they followed rules, patterns, orders. Some appeared on multiple artifacts from different locations. Some showed up on objects meant for ritual use or funerary rites. And the symbols weren't isolated to Vinca alone. They spread across a vast region, modern Serbia, Romania, Bulgaria, and parts of Hungary. All across the Danube basin, Neolithic people were using the same signs, hundreds of them. This wasn't a local trend, it was a system. But was it writing? That question has haunted archaeologists for over a century. If the Vinca symbols were a form of script, they would be the earliest known writing system in the world. That would rewrite history. Literally, it would place ancient southeastern Europe, not Mesopotamia, at the forefront of civilization. That idea didn't sit well with many researchers, so for years the symbols were left in academic limbo, neither fully writing nor entirely art. But some were determined to look deeper. Comparative studies found striking parallels between certain Vinca symbols and later writing systems. Some resembled early Greek letters, others looked like proto-cuneiform signs. Some even matched signs from the mysterious Indus Valley script thousands of miles away. Coincidence? Maybe, but there are only so many ways to carve a straight line or a cross. Still, one thing remains clear. The Vinca culture had something to say. The figurines are especially haunting. Small humanoid statues, sometimes androgynous, sometimes alien-looking, with large eyes and thin bodies. Some wear necklaces. Some seem to hold offerings. Many have symbols engraved on their chests, foreheads, or backs, almost like tattoos. Were they gods, ancestors, shamans, or something else entirely? One particularly eerie discovery was a clay tablet from Tartaria, Romania. It bore 3 rows of symbols, clearly organised, deliberately spaced. When it was found in 1961, it stunned the archaeological world. It looked like writing, ancient writing. But there was a problem. The tablet was found alongside burned bones, human bones. Was it a ritual offering? A message for the dead? A code meant to be buried forever? We may never know. There's no Vinca Rosetta Stone, no bilingual texts, no surviving culture to explain the symbols. The civilization that created them vanished thousands of years ago, leaving behind only pottery, ruins, and questions. Some researchers argue that even if the symbols weren't full writing, they were a precursor, what scholars call proto-writing, a bridge between simple markings and a true written language, the beginning of abstraction, of record-keeping, of memory outside the mind. Others go further. They suggest the Vinca people were part of a forgotten age of civilization, that writing, cities, and organized religion may have begun earlier than we thought, in Europe, not the Middle East. These ideas are controversial. They challenge deeply rooted historical narratives, but the evidence is there, in the dirt, the clay, and the carved silence of the past. And the mystery doesn't end there. Some fringe theorists claim the figurines' appearance, wide eyes, narrow faces, suggest contact with beings not of this world. Aliens, they say, or ancient visitors from somewhere else. The Vinca symbols in this theory were attempts to record encounters we can no longer imagine. But even without aliens, the story is strange enough. A Neolithic culture, sophisticated and wide-reaching, creating symbolic systems and lifelike statues before the so-called cradle of civilization was even built. A people who spoke through symbols, then vanished, leaving no trace of their language, their beliefs, or even their names, just signs. Long before the Great Pyramid dominated the desert skyline, before the Library of Alexandria held the knowledge of the ancient world, there was another wonder, one that even the ancients spoke of with awe and fear. The lost labyrinth of Egypt. It wasn't just a myth. Ancient historians like Herodotus, Strabo, and Pliny the Elder all wrote about it. Not as legend, but as fact. Herodotus, who visited Egypt in the 5th century BCE, claimed it surpassed anything he'd seen in Greece. He described it as a massive building near the city of Crocodilopolis. Yes, that was a real place, modern-day Hawara in the Fayum region. According to Herodotus, this labyrinth had 3,000 rooms, half of them underground, all connected by twisting corridors, columned halls, and false doors, a place so vast and confusing that even he, with guides, couldn't make sense of it. But he was clear. This wasn't just a maze, it was a temple, a tomb, and a monument to Egypt's past. So, where is it now? Here's the mystery. No one knows. Despite numerous historical accounts, the labyrinth has vanished so completely that some scholars even doubted it ever existed. But others, they kept looking. In the late 1800s, famed Egyptologist Flinders Petrie excavated the site of Hawara. He found the pyramid of Pharaoh Amenemhat III, the ruler many believe built the labyrinth. Around it, he discovered a massive stone foundation, but no maze, no chambers, just ruins, scattered and stripped as if someone had erased the structure on purpose. Still, the accounts wouldn't go away. Herodotus wasn't alone. Strabo, writing centuries later, also described the labyrinth in detail. He even gave measurements. He claimed it rivaled the pyramids in grandeur. The underground chambers, he noted, were off-limits, sacred, said to be the burial place of kings, and the crocodiles they worshipped. Yes, crocodiles. In Fayum, these animals were sacred, tied to the god Sobek. Some believe the labyrinth wasn't just a temple, it was a spiritual nexus, a place where kings prepared for the afterlife, or were buried with creatures that represented their power in the next world. But why would such a vast structure disappear? One theory is that later rulers, like the Romans, used it as a quarry. The labyrinth's limestone walls, covered in inscriptions and hieroglyphs, might have been stripped and reused for other buildings. Piece by piece it was taken apart, until all that remained was sand and memory. But some claim it's still there. In 2008, a team of researchers used ground-penetrating radar at Hawara. What they found stunned them. Beneath the sand, under layers of silt and debris, were massive rectangular structures, stone walls and voids that formed an underground grid. Not natural formations, something man-made, something big. The researchers believed they'd rediscovered the lost labyrinth. But just as their findings gained attention, everything stopped. Egyptian authorities restricted further access. The team was not allowed to excavate. The data was quietly archived. The story faded. Why? That's another mystery. Some say it was bureaucracy. Others whisper of secrets buried too deep, of knowledge that challenges the accepted timeline of history. If the labyrinth exists, and if it's as ancient and complex as described, it could hold texts, relics, or architecture from a time we barely understand. Maybe even records from before the dynastic period. Some even suggest the labyrinth might predate Egypt as we know it, that it wasn't built by Amenemhat III but by someone older, a lost civilization, a culture with technology and spiritual practices now completely forgotten. It sounds impossible until you remember what Herodotus said. He wasn't just impressed, he was overwhelmed. He called it more awe-inspiring than the pyramids. And yet, today, we speak of the pyramids constantly, and the labyrinth? Silence, as if it slipped into a crack in time, swallowed by the sand, or hidden on purpose. There are even older maps, drawn by Arab travellers and medieval explorers, marking strange square formations near the Fayum, underground chambers, blocked passages. Some say they heard strange echoes in the earth, or found carved stones leading nowhere. Is it imagination, or a structure too vast to comprehend? Even modern satellite images hint at something beneath the region, shapes that don't match the natural terrain. And yet, official recognition remains elusive. Maybe the lost labyrinth of Egypt isn't lost at all. Maybe it's waiting for someone to unlock its doors, to walk its halls, and to read what's carved into its hidden walls. Writings we've never seen, histories that contradict everything we thought we knew. But the deeper question is, why was it hidden? Was it merely forgotten by time? Or was it covered up deliberately? If what lies beneath Hawara is truly the labyrinth Herodotus saw, it might contain one of the greatest archaeological secrets. Buried beneath the sands of ancient Mesopotamia, near the banks of the Euphrates, lies one of humanity's oldest cities, Ur. Once a bustling metropolis in the Sumerian world, it boasted ziggurats, palaces, and temples, but none of its wonders have stirred as much unease as what lay beneath it. In the 1920s, British archaeologist Sir Leonard Woolley began excavating Ur. He expected ruins, maybe royal tombs. What he found instead shocked the world. 16 tombs filled with gold, lapis lazuli, and ornate artifacts. That wasn't the strange part. It was what surrounded the tombs. Dozens of skeletons, lined up in rows, perfectly arranged, as if asleep. Some wore elaborate headdresses made of gold and silver. Others had harps, lyres, daggers, and cups nearby. And yet, they weren't buried like royalty. They were attendants, servants, guards, musicians. They weren't killed in battle. They weren't buried alive. They were simply dead, quiet, still, and many had cups near their mouths. Woolley called them the death pits. He believed the scene represented ritual sacrifice, servants willingly accompanying their king or queen into the afterlife, a custom of devotion, an act of religious duty. But the deeper he dug, the weirder it got. In one of the largest pits, PG 1237, called the Great Death Pit, Woolley uncovered 74 bodies, mostly young women, perfectly arranged, wearing intricate jewellery, their faces toward the sky. No signs of violence, no signs of struggle, not a scratch on their bones. According to Woolley, these women had taken poison, peacefully, willingly, perhaps in some ceremonial act of mass death, a final farewell to serve their ruler beyond the grave. But not everyone agrees. Modern researchers have pointed out something odd. If they drank poison, why were their bodies so intact, so perfectly posed? Wouldn't a painful death show on their faces? Wouldn't there be some mess? Panic, twisting, vomiting? There wasn't. So how did they die? Some skulls, upon re-examination, had blunt force trauma. Cracks, fractures, as if struck hard. Suddenly the peaceful scene didn't look so peaceful. Were they drugged, knocked unconscious, killed with precision? And if so, why all the effort to make it look serene? Here's where it gets stranger. One of the most elaborate tombs belonging to Queen Puabi had a chamber filled with treasures, and several female attendants lying beside her. Each was richly dressed. One still had her gold comb in her hair. It wasn't just a burial, it was a performance. The entire pit seemed orchestrated, not chaos, not mourning, almost theatrical, like a message meant to be seen by someone. But who, and for what purpose? Woolley believed it was an example of elite Sumerian ritual, an afterlife convoy, that the king or queen required their full court in the next world. But even in ancient times, mass human sacrifice was rare. And this was something else. Mass poisonings, blunt trauma, gold-lined graves with musicians and warriors staged in eerie silence. It felt rehearsed, like a final play. There's another theory. Some believe these weren't sacrifices at all, but victims of something stranger. A failed experiment, a cult ritual, an initiation gone wrong? Could it have been a mass suicide event like a Sumerian Jonestown? Others suggest something darker, that the elite of Ur were engaging in necromantic practices, that these pits weren't meant just to honor the dead, but to trap souls, bind them, or channel their energy. That the arrangement of the bodies, the music, the items, all had symbolic meaning for the journey beyond, or worse, for communication back. In many ancient cultures, death was a door, not an end, but a passage. If that's what the death pits of Ur were, a kind of human key to unlock that door, then what were the Sumerians trying to reach, and did it answer? Even the name Ur meant the place, perhaps not a city at all, but a gateway, a spiritual crossroads, one buried over, silenced by time, but never fully explained. Today, the artifacts of Ur lie in museums, the gold helmets, the harps, the combs and daggers, cleaned, catalogued, removed from the pits where they once stood. But the mystery remains. Why did dozens, sometimes hundreds of people die for the burial of one? Was it duty or design? Was it an honor or a sentence? And if we could walk among them, into those deep chambers, into that haunting stillness, would we finally understand? Or would we realize some questions were never meant to be answered? France, late 1600s, the height of Louis XIV's reign, a world of candlelit corridors, royal secrets and velvet masks. Behind the golden glow of Versailles, a chilling mystery was unfolding, one so strange, even now, no one can fully explain it. A man was locked away in the darkest cells of France. His crime, unknown. His name, erased. His punishment, to be forgotten. He was moved from prison to prison, the Bastille, Pignerol, Sainte Marguerite, always under the guard of the king's most trusted jailer. He lived in luxury, fresh clothes, good food, but always alone, always watched, and always wearing a mask. Some said it was made of iron, others said it was velvet with iron beneath. Either way, no one was allowed to see his face, not even the guards. If he spoke of his identity, he would be killed. If anyone saw his face, same fate, and this went on for over 30 years. He died in 1703, buried under a fake name, his cell stripped clean, his belongings burned, his face and name taken to the grave. But rumours never die. The most famous theory? That he was the king's twin brother, hidden at birth to prevent a fight over the crown. If people knew, France would tear itself apart. So Louis XIV ordered him locked away, not executed, but erased. Other theories suggest he was a diplomat who betrayed the king, or a servant who heard something he shouldn't have. There's even talk that he was the king's real father, a secret the monarchy could never allow to surface. Whoever he wasn't just a prisoner, he was a symbol, something the king feared so much it wasn't enough to silence him. He had to disappear. No one ever learned his name, but his silence became louder than any confession. The man in the iron mask didn't just wear a mystery, he became one.